Hello there, my beautiful book lovers. My name is Kimia, and welcome to my book knock. Today, we are going on a mythical adventure. I wanted to do a video about some of the books that I have been loving so far so much because I love mythology. Mythology is one of the oldest way that people were creating and telling stories to kids, one another, and it made such an important impact on each culture around the world. A lot of superstition were based on the mythology of that region or culture, and so because of that, I always was very fascinated that how there are some elements that you can see it throughout the world. It doesn't matter where or which place those in mythology are coming from. They share some aspect, while some of those other aspects are so different from one another. And so I was always fascinated by it. And while I read a lot of Greek mythology while growing up, because that one is the main sort of a pop culture aspect of mythology, that when you talk about mythology, the first thing that comes to your mind is Zeus and Hera and all of those Greek gods. And while I love them and I have nothing against it, at the same time I started to read into the mythology of other cultures and other part of the world. And so for today, we are going to look at 5 books that are based on or sort of retelling of some old mythology from around the world. And without further ado, let's get into them, shall we? First, we're going to start with Greek mythology because that's the first one that sort of pops into your head if you're thinking of mythology, or at least for me, that's the case. And for this section, I picked a book that I recently discovered, and I am just in love with this book so much that I have actually read it twice already, and it's been in a couple of months that I read it twice. So it's that good. And that is Clytemnestra by Costanza Cosati. Please forgive me for my pronunciation. I'm just horrible at it, but this is the book. And so this book, it's about Helen's sister, Clytemnestra. So if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know that other than the big gods and Zeus, Hera, Ares, and all of those guys, after certain time passed from those guys, we have the Trojan War. That's one of the biggest sort of part of the Greek mythology. And so, that Trojan War starts and happened because Helen is kidnapped, and now all of these guys that were wanted one day to marry Helen. By the way, spoiler alert if you have never heard of that story. Helen is the most beautiful girl that have ever existed. She's just gorgeous. And so a lot of people want to marry her, obviously. And then all of these prince and heroes and whatnot, they go to sort of ask for her hand. And then eventually, because they're worried that all of these going to create a conflict, they make a sort of one of the guys making a sort of a suggestion that he's you know what, before Helen choose a husband, we're all going to make a promise that no matter who Helen picks, we're going to promise that we will protect Helen and this dude, whoever it's going to be. And so if anything happened, we all will come back together and save them and help them. So they all promised that, and then Helen choose a guy, they married, all of that, and then some years pass, and then here comes a guy, and then he sort of kidnapped Helen and took her with him. And so now all of these guys that wanted to one day, they wanted to marry her, and they didn't end up marrying her, but because they made that promise, now they're all coming back to aid Helen's husband to go and save her and bring her back. So that's Trojan War, and that's how Trojan War starts and all of that. But then this book, it's actually a retelling of this story, and not exactly only a Trojan War, but how the upbringing of Helen and Clytemnestra and all of their stories. Because Clytemnestra is the sister that is not the pretty one, but she's super smart, very brave, very courageous, and she's the one that if anybody really needs help, they look up to her, and she is really just the leader of the group, if I can say, sort of in the siblings. And so because of that, I love this book so much because, again, when it comes to Trojan War and books about Trojan War, the focus is, well, not exactly always Helen even per se, because Helen is this sort of treasure that they're going to get back. And the story, it's about the men's side of the view who are going to the war and everything that happens throughout those war, because like there's all of these different things that happen. And so the story is never really about the woman, not even about Helen. They don't really look into what happened to Helen, like why did she go with this guy because she wanted to? Did she got kidnapped? So like, you know, it's never really focused on that. But this book, it's really looking at that, and it's really just retelling this story so beautifully and looking at the siblings' relationship, looking at the connection of these two sisters and everything that they went through. And especially because, you know, Clytemnestra, she had such a hard life too. And throughout the mythology aspect of this story, she's always looked at this very heartless sort of a woman, you know, because she's a woman that is really looking to find a way that it's beneficial to her, and she doesn't really care about anything or anyone, and that's how she has been portrayed. But through this book, we are actually looking at it from a different point of view, and we're seeing that why she turned out to be that way. And even if she is a heartless person, or did she do some stuff that she did because she had actually good reason behind it. So anyway, this book is just so great. It's wonderful. Again, I have read it already twice because it's that good, because you are going through all of these journeys because you start the book from a very young age and there are still children. They're growing up in the palace and like, you know, they're having fun and they're being kids, and then they grow up and they're becoming young women, and Helen is this beautiful woman that everybody's like, you know, just looking for her, and it's creating this uncomfortable situation for Helen herself because again, she's like not sure what's happening all of a sudden. She was a kid a day ago and now all of a sudden all these men want to marry her. So it's like very interesting to see the transition from these young kids to very strong women who made up their mind to do things to protect themselves, their family, their kids. So it's a great read. I honestly very, very 100% recommend this book because like when it comes to Greek mythology, there's thousands of retelling and just sort of stories based on Greek mythology out there that a lot of them I actually even myself love them, but I wanted to suggest something that hasn't been given as much as attention as some of the rest of the books that it's like a retelling of Greek mythology. So again, it's a wonderful book. If you're looking for a Greek mythology retelling, this is a very good one, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Then moving on, we're going to look at Norse mythology, and these are mythologies that a lot of them comes from the northern region of Europe, and especially like, you know, Norway, Sweden. It's like really like Viking culture. And the book that I want to suggest for this region and part, it's Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. So this book, it's delightful. If you have seen any of Thor movies, those are based on Norse mythology. Thor, Loki, Odin, those are all like the gods that comes from these mythology. And this book, I love it so much because Neil Gaiman, he's one of my favorite. Honestly, he is such a talented writer, and he is so just wonderful when it comes to fiction and fantasy sort of world, because he knows how to build fun world. And so this book, while he's not building the world, because again, he's just retelling all of these mythology, he knows how to play with them and how to sort of introduce you first at the beginning to this mythology world and to sort of give you an intro of like what's happening, what's different, and like what are the gods and like, you know, the creatures and all of that. And then gives you all of these like sort of short stories that some of them are related to one another. And it's just so wonderful, so fun, because like Loki, it's like one of my all-time favorite characters because, you know, like he is the god of sort of chaos, you know, anywhere that he goes, he creates this chaos because he loves it. And so it's very entertaining and interesting to see how he gets himself into a lot of tight space and how he sort of end up always coming out victorious in a sense. And so I highly recommend this book. This one is different because again, it's like a bunch of short stories and it's not like a retelling of one main stories, and it's sort of just introducing you to all of these different characters and tells you stories about each one of them. But again, it's still very entertaining, and it's very fun because, again, you see some sort of similarities between Norse mythology and Greek mythology, because, like, you know, all of these mythologies started with, like, you know, some sort of like gods and heroes and like different creatures, and while they are different in some aspect, they are similar in some other aspects. So it's very entertaining to see how they play it differently. And so since I very much love Neil Gaiman's writing, I thought this would be a very good pick and fun read for this section of the recommendations. Then moving to a different part of the world, we have Egyptian mythology. So those are also a lot fun and different, but also very entertaining in their own way. And the book that I picked for this section, it's A Dead Djinn in Cairo by P. Clark, if I'm not wrong. And so this book, it's very entertaining. This one, it's a little bit different because it's not exactly a retelling of a mythology, but it's a new story that uses the element of Egyptian mythology. So in this book, we have a dead jinn, and jinn is a mythical creature that is from like a lot of Egyptians mythology. They have it also in like a lot of like Persian mythology and all those like other part of like Middle East and whatnot. And so we are in a world, in a different sort of alternative Cairo, and in this world there's all of this mystical creature, and there's that gene that is found in this hotel, and we have a detective, Fatima, that she's now going to try to figure out what happened to this gene, and trying to figure out if he died from like natural causes or there is something behind it. And I love this book so much because this one, the world building, it's very entertaining. I love it because it's still Cairo, but not exactly. And that's what I love about it, because like I love when author plays with this like line of reality and sort of crossing it and mixing it with fiction and fantasy. And this is exactly that, because like you have the elements of that from this world and from the like the regular normal Cairo, but also you have all of these like mystical and also even like technology wise, there are like different things that are like futuristic. And so it's very entertaining to see how all of these things comes together. And while it's using the element of mythology, which is from like, you know, way back, and using elements that are like more futuristic, and bring them all together and create a new world, and then trying to solve and create a like the sort of a murder mystery book out of it. So it's very fun. You know, it's one of those reads that it's very entertaining. You're not going, or at least from what I felt, you're not going to feel super lost because you do not know that much about like the elements that has been used in this book. And that's a great thing about like fantasy in general, because like no matter how unique and different the world is, that's the point of fantasy, and you don't really need to know that background knowledge to be able to relate to this story. And so it's very entertaining. If you love murder mysteries, it's very fun. It has those elements. It's sort of like a beautiful marriage of murder mystery and fantasy. And if you like any of those things, I highly recommend this book to you. Then moving to Asia, we have Indian mythology, and those are also super fun in their own way, because again, if you know anything about Indian mythology, there's many gods, and similar to like Greek mythology that you have all of these gods, that means that there's a lot of conflicts. That's the same as Indian mythology as well. That's like almost like all sort of mythology. There is a lot of gods, and all of them create a lot of chaos, conflicts, issues. It's just like a big family that have a lot of issues together. And so the book that I want to suggest for this category, and again, please forgive me for my pronunciation, it's the book The Palace of Illusion by Chitra Banerjee. So this book, it's a retelling of an Indian epic, Mahabharata, and the main character that we have, it's Pancali. So she is an entity that is born out of fire, and she's very well known for her beauty, her knowledge, and the story, it's about her. She's similar to, well, I don't know if I can say that it's similar to Helen, because again, like, you know, all of these stories, they have some similarities and they are different in some different ways. So she is sort of like Helen, that again, it's the time for her to get married. So there's all of these different princes and heroes that are coming to ask for her hand, similar to Helen. But then the story, it's different because because of some sort of different mistakes and stuff that happens, she end up to have to marry 5 brothers. And so this story, it's about the conflict that happened because of she marrying these 5 brothers, and then they're sent to exile, and she's going with them, and she's like, there's this other family that, like, again, they wanted to, like, one of their sons to marry her, and it didn't happen, and so it's creating a lot of conflicts, and there's like all of these like epic sort of battles that it's happening, and the story, it's about really her trying to figure out this situation that has just kind of happened, and her loyalty to all of her husbands, and again, those husbands, they're brothers. So it's very entertaining to see all of these characters and their dynamic, because we have this one family, we have another family, and then we have this girl in between of all of these things, and then we have other people with their conflicts and how they're adding to all of these conflicts. So it's very entertaining. I really enjoyed the retelling because this was a story that I have never heard of, and so it was a very nice introduction for me to this story. And again, I mean, since I haven't read the original story, I cannot really say that if it stayed true to every single aspect of the story, but from what I got and some of the reviews that I read, it has been very true to it. So that's another reason that I enjoyed and I sort of recommend it. And I enjoyed it. I never thought really that like, oh, I'm reading something that like there's a lot of like just like battle scenes and like I'm just bored, because that happens to me sometimes. I'm just like, can we move and like go get to the like the other exciting part? With this book was not really that, because there's so many things happening and they're all so important in their own way, because they all come back together and they're all related in one way or another, that it was just so entertaining. It's like, you know, one of those like dramas that you're watching and there's a lot of things happening, but still it's very entertaining and you want to watch all of it because you want to see who is going to win, and you're rooting for some people and sometimes you change that. So anyway, it's like very just fun. There's so much happening, but in a fun way. So if you like that, you should read this book. And last but not least, I wanted to pick from my homeland, and that is Iran. So I wanted to pick a book that it's a sort of like a retelling or based on Persian folklore and mythology, and that is Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashar-Doust. So this book, it's delightful. I grew up reading a lot of Persian mythology, and it's just very entertaining. I loved it so much. It was like a very big part of my growing up. And so when I came across this book, I was just so excited to read it. And I'm so glad by the time that I was done with it, I was like, I approve. Because, you know, sometimes it's like very hard when stories are based on like mythology that you know very well, and then like you are hesitant that if they're going to do it right, if they're going to do it justice or not. And this book, especially because it's not really a retelling, but it's again similar to the Egyptian mythology, it's a book that has picked elements from Persian mythology and used it to create its own story. So I was like a little bit hesitant and worried that if it has done it right or not, but it has done it greatly. It's just like, it's so nice. It's such a perfect book. So the main story, it's about Soraya, and she's this young girl that has been cursed by this demon, or sort of div, we call it in our mythology. And this curse is that anything that she touches will die. And so because of that, she's like living this like secret hidden world and life, because she could not come out of the palace that she's living with her family, because everybody's worried. She's also worried to ever like touch anything or anyone especially. And so as she's growing up, she's first not sure what is happening, and then later on she realized that this curse comes from this thief, and she's trying to figure out that like what happened, why she's the one that is cursed, and how to deal with that. And so this book, it's just, again, one of those other books that it has the elements of, you have fantasy, you have romance, you have mythology, and all of them come together in just such a perfect epic world. And I loved it so much because you have the elements that are so Persian that you can just like, if you know the Persian elements, you just like, you feel like home. But at the same time, it's not that far from any other sort of culture or aspect of different lives that you just not understand what's happening. And that was why I really enjoyed it and I loved it, because you can read this book not knowing it's about any mythology and you still enjoy it as a fantasy book. But if you know something about Persian mythology, or if you want to learn something about Persian mythology, you read it and you kind of like pick all of those elements out of it and learn more about it. So it's just like a very fun read, and I enjoyed it so much because this story, again, it's told through Soraya's eyes, and it's about her and her journey to come to term with this curse that she has been given and how to overcome it, how to sort of end it. And through the story, we meet all of these different characters that they're all entertaining on their own way. And that's the reason I loved it, because while the main story is about Soraya, we still get to know other characters. And that's like a sign of a good book, honestly. And I'm not just saying it for this book, but in general, because like, you know, when you have a book that the main character is 3D and you learn a lot about them, but the rest of the cast, they're all very two-dimensional characters that like, they don't have anything really going on for them, and they're just there to support the main character. And it's just like, I want to know more about the like this other character or whatnot. But that's not the case for this book. So you really like start to enjoy like her family members and like, you know, like their dynamic and what's happening with them, and the guy that she's sort of interested in, and his sort of like side of story and everything that's happening to him. So anyway, it's a very fun read if you're interested in Persian mythology, or if you want to get interested in it. This is a very good start for that. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you have not given mythology a chance before, or you have been focusing on Greek or like Egyptian mythology only, I hope this video gives you an idea of how to expand your knowledge of mythology from around the world. Don't forget to share your favorite mythology retelling or sort of mythology down in the comment below. Like, subscribe. Until the next video, happy reading!